Okay, we're talking Sky Bet League One, playoff semi-finals, second legs on Not the Top 20 podcast, sponsored by Sky Bet and the Sky Bet EFL Building Foundations Fund. If you're watching this on YouTube, I hurt my knee. It's very sore. That's why I'm sitting in bed, not in the studio next to George. I literally cannot stand up or walk right now. So if you feel bad for me, why not subscribe to the channel if you don't already? We're looking back at Bradford 0, Bolton 1. Bolton win 2-0 on aggregate. And then Stockport 2, Stevenage 0. Stockport win 3-0 on aggregate. George, it was perhaps too simplistic to do this, but I liked the idea ahead of the playoffs that we had one in each tie, a Cinderella story. Bradford, in their first season back at this level, finishing fourth in the league, incredible. Stevenage, small budget for the level, punching well above their weight, strained every sinew to get into the playoffs against, in Stockport and Bolton, teams that have spent more time at this level, building bigger, stronger squads, having good seasons, but not great ones, depending on what happens in the playoffs. And in that context, you have to say the bigger fish won the day.
Yeah, I reckon any Stockport fans or people from the club listening might remind you they haven't been up at this level for that long. But so quick has been their ability to establish themselves at League One level, and because obviously the money spent and the players they brought in means that they aren't a surprise, such a surprise as Stevenage are to be there. But yeah, I mean, both favourites here go through in in Stockport Stevenage's case, not the most dramatic of circumstances if you take out the remarkable Ben Osborne goal in the 95th minute in the first leg. Like here, it was a classic semi-final second leg where the home team, with home advantage and already ahead, came out of the blocks incredibly fast, knowing they could basically kill the game if they got ahead early, and they did. Louis Barry scored a lovely Louis Barry goal, getting on the ball on the left-hand side, cutting into his right foot and shooting into the far corner. We've seen him do it so many times. It's impossible to defend against at this level. And it's just great to see him back fit in a Stockport shirt and having fun and scoring goals. And I think he is going to be a huge part of the League One playoff final on Sunday. This is going to be his chance on a huge stage at Wembley to show everyone what he's all about. And ahead of a big summer for him, he's playing well and he's back at it. Carl Wootton, playing centre back, scored from a corner, kind of 15 or so minutes later, and at that point, Stockport County 3-0 up and looking pretty good to go up. Like, credit to Stevenage, who gave a really good go at it in the second half of the game. Corey Adai making a couple of good saves. They gave a really good account of themselves, but they were 3-0 down basically, and it's sometimes easy to look okay when you're 3-0 down. That shouldn't take away from what's been an unbelievable season for Alex Ravel and his team. Like if I was to talk about the teams who'll be unheralded, where actually their success is as impressive as any other team and what any other manager has done this season, then Stevenage and Alex Ravel would be right up there. Amazing performance from them to steady the ship as they did halfway through the season after a bad run of form and go again to get their place in the playoffs. It was always going to be so tough for them to get past Stockport County, and it's not a huge surprise they didn't do it. But they gave a decent account of themselves in both legs here, really. An aberration at the end of the first leg, and then just outclassed in the first half here being the difference, but not a huge shock.
Big Kyle Wootton. What a story it is. What a story it is. And what a lovely goal that was from Louis Barry, who is a hell of a player as well. Yeah, one of the more low-key playoff semi-finals, I would suggest, across the three leagues, just on account of, well, Stockport winning 3-0, basically, and Stevenage really struggling to come back after the disappointment of that injury time goal in the first leg. So, Bradford 0, Bolton 1 was the final score in the second leg at Valley Parade. So, Bolton win 2-0 on aggregate. I would say the first half was the perfect half from a Bolton point of view. There has to have been concern, or rather, ahead of the game, they would have spoken about one of the biggest threats to their progression to the playoff final would have been the start of the second leg at a raucous Valley Parade, where Bradford have been so good for, well over a year right now, have won so many games, have always found a way to hurt their opposition, and can be incredibly intense and can really stifle things, both with their on-pitch tactics and strategy, and also the off-pitch atmosphere. And I think you have to say that in the first half, Bolton did a fantastic job of quashing that and making sure that that didn't happen, and making sure that at 0-0, at half-time rather, it was still 0-0. Now, there was, at one point, a bit of a nudge in the back on Caden Jackson from Owen Toll, not given as a penalty by the referee. Fair enough. 68th minute, Max Power gets a little cutback, 20, 25 yards out, curls a shot, Bonham tips it onto the bar. Good save, onto the bar. A little later on, as the pressure was mounting somewhat, a cross hit Conway, the Bolton left-back's hand, from very close range. Was it stuck out? Was it in an unnatural position? Where are we at with the handball rule? I don't know. But certainly on CoComs, they thought, no, that's too close range. He's not moved his hand towards the ball. He's just kicked it off his hand. I feel like I do see them given, but I don't know. That means that, George, adding to the one in the first leg that we talked about, with Caden Jackson running clear and getting a little push in the back, not given, 3 penalty incidents. There's basically, if I'm honest, basically the only thing that we can bring up when it comes to Bradford, because from an attacking point of view, they did not create very much across the 2 legs. But I'll just say it, if you play those 2 games again with a different ref, out of the 3 of them, which were all broadly sort of kind of seen them given, but would probably be controversial if they were territory, maybe across the 3 of them, they might have got a penalty in this game. But I suppose even bring that up is clutching somewhat, because there really isn't that much else to point at.
Yeah, it definitely felt like, having watched every single semi, it felt to me like there was a real desire, and maybe this is always the case in these kind of games because penalties can have such a big impact on seasons, but there were so many penalties that I thought probably were penalties that weren't given. And quite a lot of games like that we'll talk about in a bit, where this was one of them actually, which got quite heated and cards weren't really displayed. There was a moment late in the game where Thierry Gale quite clearly delayed the restart, which is a clear yellow card, and then Aidan Baldwin wasn't very happy about it, so decided to pretend to kick the ball and kick him as hard as he could in the back of the leg, which, is quite clearly a red card in my view, at the very least. Then there was a huge fracas, which led to nothing. So I don't know. I think people like this. I've spoken about it a lot before, but I personally think, regardless of the game, regardless of anything else, if it's a penalty, it's a penalty. If it's a red card, it's a red card. You don't manage the occasion, you manage the rules, and then good things come of that. I know people disagree, but yeah, it did feel like a tie that was maybe dictated by refereeing decisions to a degree. One that I think was unarguable was the Caden Jackson goal that was ruled out for offside. He was miles off, and then shortly after that, the winner came at the other end. So I did a podcast with our friend Matt called The Lion of Vienna, which is a Bolton Wanderers podcast, before the semis. And Matt was very worried about their defensive, the fact that they had been conceding lots of goals going into the playoffs. And, I spoke about how actually their underlying numbers are quite good defensively, but it does feel like for Bolton to get through 2 ties without conceding a goal is huge going into the final. And, if you look at the standout players over the 2 legs, Farino, Toll have to be up there in terms of the way that they defended their box. So yeah, significant there. And, some amazing scenes from Simons when he scored the goal. One of my favourite celebrations I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, I want to shout out really nice play from George Johnston in the build-up to that goal. He was the one that got on the ball, on the second ball, getting closed down, good feet to get away from the pressure, and then a pass through the lines to McAtee in space. Gale sprinting down the left. McAtee finds him nicely. The cutback finished off well by Simons. As you mentioned, incredible celebration from Simons, just like... Is it Tardelli, the famous Italian World Cup goal? It's a bit of Tardelli. It's a bloke scoring his 4th career league goal, his biggest by miles, who doesn't score many.
Great finish.
And great finish too. Really nice first time passed it in really, and did about 5 different celebrations, and I absolutely loved it. He managed to both run back and celebrate with the dugout and celebrate in the corner by the fans, which is a hell of an achievement.
And do a bad knee slide and slap the badge and do a salute. It was absolutely wonderful. Loved it. That's how you should celebrate. It's a big moment, big goal, big moment in his career. Love it.
Yeah. And obviously Bolton and Stockport, it's a pretty mouth-watering playoff final, I must admit. We're going to preview that in a couple of days' time. Wherever you found this, you'll find our playoff preview, so make sure you're subscribed. Just a word on the two losers, Bradford and Stevenage. I mean, for Bradford, again, what a season. You have to take a step back. You have to try and let the disappointment of them going goalless across 180 minutes fade, and remember that they've had as good a season as pretty much anyone in the EFL this season, straight up from League Two, straight up towards the top of the table immediately, and sustained it, even though in the second half of the season they had to overcome a really tough run of fixtures where the results didn't go their way around the halfway point of the season, where despite signing 7 players in January to try and maintain their position at the top, almost none of them had an impact on the team whatsoever, apart from Caden Jackson in the second half of the season. They maintained their status towards the top. Although Lincoln and Bradford pulled away, Lincoln and Cardiff pulled away, they stayed the course. They finished above Bolton, in fact. Their attacking play over the course of the season, we have to be honest, got worse and worse, got tougher and tougher to watch. They created fewer and fewer chances, and maybe that's ultimately the conclusion here. Did we see that play out over the course of playoff semi-final, 2 legs? Yeah, I think we probably did. But we also saw plenty of their qualities in these 2 games, and it was pretty marginal, just a goal in each game, and both of them really quality finishes, which Bradford couldn't muster themselves. We saw their aggression out of possession. We saw their defensive solidity in the main. We just didn't see consistent chance creation, and we didn't see them being taken when they were created, and that's probably ultimately the difference. But wow, fascinated to see how they go this summer, how they approach recruitment and squad building and going again. It would be great to see Bradford repeat the trick and be towards the top of League One next season. What of Stevenage, George? They obviously, I said strained every sinew, it felt like, to finish 6th. The reaction to them getting into the playoffs we saw on final day, understandably an incredible achievement, and it was celebrated as such. They've not managed to score a goal in the playoffs, and so they'll have to go again in League One next season. What do you make of their season, and look ahead a little as well?
Incredible season. I think Ravel his stock is now high. I guess because of, rightly or wrongly, I guess because of playing style. He might not be the most attractive manager for a team that are towards the top end of a table, or have a boast a big budget, which could help them. I'd also probably urge caution that the teams that might come knocking might be down towards the bottom end of the championship, which as we always say, can be a bit of a death knell for young managers, because it's incredibly hard and you're judged very harshly for what is a very tough job. So he signed a new contract recently, didn't he? So hopefully he's they can build again next season. There's no reason why, given their playing style, and what is quite clearly like a game model that is very, very effective at stopping teams from creating chances, that gives you such a good platform to build on. But I guess, like in the championship segment, we spoke about Millwall and about how success means a shift in expectation. And that's going to be the same for Stevenage next season, where they've now, they knocked on the door of the playoffs the season that Steve Evans left and Ravel took over towards the end of it. They were mid-table last season, and then they've got in the playoffs this season. So, regardless of anything else, and they've recruited really well. And I imagine they'll continue to add the kind of quality in advanced areas they need. But Matt Phillips came in January and did well. Dan Kemp's had a great season. Jamie Reed's had a brilliant season. So it's not just the defensive guys. So yeah, I'm really positive about them, and I really hope that they can continue to build under him, because it's something special there at the moment.
We'll finish off with some news from around the league, manager news in particular. Daniel Stendel is back at Oakwell, the new Barnsley manager. Daniel Stendel, if you don't remember, 8 years ago, I'm here to remind you that 2018-19, Daniel Stendel was Barnsley manager. They won promotion from League One. They finished 2nd. He was then sacked, I think, about a dozen games into the following championship season. That was a season in which, they won on opening day and then went 10 without a win, and he got sacked. They had a very, very young team at that point. And I will just point out that in League One, the team that went up under Stendel had Ethan Pinnock in it, had Alex Mowat, had Liam Lindsay, had Cameron McGeehan, had Jacob Brown, Corley Woodrow, Kiefer Moore, Kenneth Dougal, Brad Potts was there as well, Ryan Hedges. That was a very, very good squad that had been well put together. And you could probably say that walking into the current Barnsley situation, doesn't really look anything like that right now. They do have some good young players, I think that's fair to say, but we expect some of them, certainly Cleary and or Kelly, to probably leave this summer. It's not a happy place. The fans are rightly incredibly unhappy about the direction of travel under the current ownership. Who seemingly just aren't able to either fund Barnsley to the same level as previous owners. They can't seem to fund Barnsley to be a League One challenging budget, which is what they've understandably come to expect over the last decade. And within that, they haven't necessarily been smarter either, right? There's a way of punching above your budget. And there was a time where Barnsley did that incredibly well. This season, I would suggest finishing mid-table was probably about where the budget suggested them to be. So they've turned to Stendhal. Where's he been? Well, most recently, George, he's been with Hanover's second team. So that was initially last season in the German third tier. They got relegated, the Hanover second team. And then in the fourth tier this season, they finished a kind of, outside the playoff places. I cannot tell you anything about the third and fourth tier of German football, and I can't tell you anything about managing a team's second team rather than the first team. Obviously, that comes with probably a different remit, different objectives. So I'm not taking anything from the results, and I don't know anything about the wider context. But it does feel a little to me, while I'm excited to have Stendhal back in English football, feels a little to me like Barnsley are maybe trying to placate fans to a certain degree because he's such a popular former manager, but also maybe like they're trying to recreate a vibe from 5 to 8 years ago, the good times, if you like. That feels like quite difficult for them to recreate maybe in the current context.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked him in his first spell, and there's a degree to which, I think we've got to be wary of kind of reading about his time. Obviously he went to Hearts and COVID basically ended that, and he didn't have much time to kind of do anything there. But his time in Germany, I was happy just to ignore it, because we've already seen him here, albeit quite a long time ago. And he's an interesting case as well, where when he got sacked from Barnsley, like even though they were in woeful form at the time, it was a rare case where fans were up in arms and were devastated that the decision had been made. So, even though it might be kind of PR-y, like there's a massive element where managers are just kind of PR anyway. Like, it's as much as they're tacticians and can help with the club, they also can change the feeling amongst the fans. They can change the feeling amongst players. And so at a time where they appointed a guy who was a very good player for Barnsley last summer, making his first steps in management, and he did okay. But going and getting someone who has sat in the dugout at Oakwell, has delivered success, has created an incredible atmosphere amongst the fans and the players, there's some sense to that. So even though I fully agree with your comments on the status of the club right now, I think this could be quite a smart move.
Nice. Well, there's also managerial news elsewhere in West Yorkshire here at Huddersfield, where Liam Manning, who was placed on compassionate leave in March, the club have confirmed that he will not return to the club as head coach next season. The club granted compassionate leave because of ongoing personal matters relating to the tragic passing of his newborn son Theo in October 2024. From the club's statement 5 or 6 days ago, said that following the most recent conversations, the decision has been mutually agreed in the best interest of Liam, his family, and the club. So most importantly, in fact, the only really important thing is wishing Liam Manning and his family well in this situation. Of course, from a footballing point of view for Huddersfield Town, they will now be running, as we speak, a head coach search. Drury and Stead, who took the team in the last few games of the season, there was quite a lot to like about their attacking play. There was quite a lot not to like about their game management and defensive play. They are, I'm sure, part of the conversation, but it seems like the club are also going with an external search for a new manager, so we'll see who they turn to, and no doubt we'll have some thoughts on who they do turn to. This is a club that it would be great to see them appoint a manager this summer that is still their manager the season after, put it that way, because that will reflect maybe that for the first time in quite a few years they might have actually got it right, and that's not just on the manager but on the club as a whole and their whole approach to next season. And finally, Sheffield Wednesday. We don't know, I don't think we know exactly who their manager will be. I suppose it looks like they are backing Henrik Pedersen, which is nice to see in many ways. it looks like Simon Wilson will be leading the rebuild from a football operations perspective. Simon Wilson, the current CEO of Stockport County, but has been their director of football for a long period of time now, and indeed from their rise from the National League towards the top of League One. Stockport have been in many ways held up as a bit of a model club in terms of the way that they approach recruitment. Of course, with Dave Challoner at the helm, they've been on an incredible upwards trajectory, but Wilson certainly gets a lot of credit whenever you hear the owner Mark Stott talking. He basically says, I wouldn't have actually done any of this unless Simon Wilson was part of it, and we couldn't have done any of it without Simon Wilson helping on the football operations side of things. So he is very well regarded in the game. He's done some pretty interesting interviews, particularly with Training Ground Guru, in which he's explained some of his methodology, which I guess will be nice for Sheffield Wednesday fans to watch. It's got to be a complete rebuild, obviously, of the playing squad this summer, and Wilson will be at the heart of that. And we're going to write a piece on ntt20.com over the next few weeks, trying to work out how he may approach rebuilding this Sheffield Wednesday squad. I should say this hasn't been officially announced yet, but heavily reported in the local news, and those Wednesday local reporters have been pretty damn good at their job over the last 12 months, so expect that to go over the line. So there's a League One recap. We've done the same for the Championship, semi-final, second legs, talking Spygate, of course, and League Two as well, wherever you found this one. Cheers and go well.